I know it's not very, sitting here with a cup of coffee. It's because I have to drive. Otherwise, I would be tucking into something a bit stronger.
A little bit stronger. Well, I'm lucky. I'm having my whiskey with my haggis because my wonderful husband is currently cooking me haggis, neeps and tatters, which is amazing for an Englishman.
This is my supper because I'll be a wee while before I get home, and I have haggis.
Excellent choice.
Haggis crisps. That will keep me going till the wee hours.
Right, well, let's get started. Welcome everyone, happy Burns night. I am Lettie West from London Scottish House. With me this evening I've got Clare Campbell from Prickly Thistle. Say hello, Clare.
Hi everybody. Thank you, Lettie, for inviting me to come along tonight and take part in this little Burns blather. And I hope everyone enjoys the next wee while, and that everyone has a drink and something yummy to eat.
Fabulous. Right, so as I've mentioned already, everyone should be on mute so that there's no interruption in the audio. There will be an option at the end to ask questions, so if you have a question, please do send them either directly to me in the chat function or just to everyone in the group, and we'll get to them at the end. If there's anything that we don't cover before the end of the session, we hopefully will finish just before 7, then I will send those questions to Clare and get them collated for everyone and send them on afterwards. But Clare, my first question to you on this Burns night is, what does Burns night mean to you?
So good question. Burns night, I think most folk won't be surprised, but it's the thing that fascinates me most is the slightly rebellious life that Robert Burns had led. There is the, hundreds of years later, we're very familiar with Old Lang, Hogmanay celebrations and the romantic sort of poetry, and he was a fan of the ladies, but actually he was quite sort of revolutionary and a bit of a rebel in his time. He very much got involved in things with regards to ending poverty. He was, he came from a very poor background himself. He anti-slavery, got involved in that feminist movement. So there, and kind of a lot of his poems had undertones of kind of rebellious kind of messaging against, be it government or anything that's happening globally. So for me, that's the part, I think, in any character in any century that I'm always drawn to. It's like, what did they really fight for that really impacted on other people? As much as obviously all of his amazing work is kind of inspires people, their proposals, you name it. But I love the fact that actually he was a real people person, and he came from a really sort of humble background, and that never ever left him in his whole lifetime. So for me, it's that kind of spirited tenacity to kind of probably go into places that got him into trouble. So there you go. So that's what I certainly think of and admire most. Although I've like most kids going through the Scottish education system, we've all studied his works in English and not really quite understanding what any of it means. But no, now that I'm where I am and doing what I am, I just really admire and respect his ability to be quite courageous in some of these really important points that are so relevant to today.
And what would you be doing on a normal Burns night, given that we're all in lockdown? I think almost everyone who'll be with us this evening will be in some kind of lockdown, tied to their sofas or their kitchens and not allowed to leave to go out for their usual dances and Burns night suppers. What would you normally be doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, last year I was very, very fortunate to be in Los Angeles for a Burns Bash there, supporting BAFTA LA, and we donated a prize to help raise money for scholarships for Scottish aspiring actors to get that opportunity to go out there. So I was very lucky in LA. That is not normal for me to be in Santa Monica, with Lulu singing and Ross King, and then live kind of television with Lorraine Kelly, the wee hours of the morning, certainly here, but very late at night in Los Angeles. So that was incredible. And of course, that's when Sam Hewn launched his Sassenach whiskey, and it was incredible. But normally, if the truth be told, the last 3 years of my life, I am here. Most nights on Burns night, not quite Christmas night, but yeah, no, I was very lucky last year, but it's yeah, that's really most of the time here.
Leads us nicely into telling everyone what it is you do. So you are a qualified accountant. How on earth did you get to where you are now, which is designing the most amazing tartans, creating it? You've created our own, which I've got here.
Yes, we have some here as well.
Talk us through how you came from accountancy to cloth.
I know, yes. Well, I mean, there's still numbers involved. I have to be able to count the threads, so I have to be able to get that formula right. So so there's still a bit of number work in there, certainly. But yeah, good question. We'd probably end up being here for hours if I went on and on about it all. But there was just so much had happened by the time I got to my mid-30s, really, that just made me really fundamentally now think about what is my purpose, what am I going to do? I was very fortunate to work in some great places and do sort of accountancy, sort of finance director type roles and work with some incredible people. But it was quite often maybe in sectors that I wasn't overly passionate about as a human being, and have that real sense of pride. So yeah, so that kind of calling was brewing and brewing in my mid-30s, and a few things happened, and I went on this whole kind of voyage of discovery. What I thought 3 years ago, I have just learned so much since then, and it's changed and it's pivoted, but with the accountancy in me, I would be lying to say that there wasn't this kind of economic kind of due diligence mission I went on. I wanted to understand why something that was so iconic to Scotland was such a small part of our industrial economy, its contribution to communities, job creation, the supply chains, the rural agricultural connections. And so that big due diligence journey of really understanding, the history and what was the status quo at that point. And being a Scot, living in the Highlands all my life, I was shocked as to how small it had become and how difficult it was, and understanding people's perceptions both inside Scotland and outside Scotland. So the sort of, for me then, I just thought, gosh, I've been so fortunate to work with lots of other companies in other sectors. How could I use my learnings to help revive and contribute to a sector that I think is really important in terms of identity, legacy, and messaging? It's got such a powerful kind of sort of motivation and emotional connection to people. How could we then create some sort of really incredible sort of industry revival? So the accountant in me kind of, that was familiar stomping grounds to understand that piece. And somehow I'm now here with a mill. I had no clue how to weave anything. I had watched it lots of times, but it was me in a shed for a couple of years. I thought, I'm not going to create a job in this current situation. So it became obvious I had to become a weaver. So we bought this equipment and moved up from the Scottish borders. My husband was just like, Claire, you've just gone and got all of this equipment. You don't even know how to work it. You don't even know how to switch it on. And I was like, don't worry, Alan, we'll find somebody. We're going to the moon. We've built pyramids. We've done, hundreds of years ago, everyone wove. So it can't be that hard. It is hard, but it's not impossible. And I'm a bit stubborn that way, and kind of like, no one's going to tell me it's not possible, and no one's going to tell me, why are you bothering? I thought, no, just keep going. So here I am 3 years later, the most amazing team of people in the area that that have managed to convince initially to join us. Most of us were not classically trained in any way, but it's I think it's allowed us to be super creative and not be kind of blinkered by what would have been sort of traditional within that sector, and be really very sort of relevant to the here and now, hopefully, and the future, and then blend all the kind of current issues that are global concerns, and how we can use tartan as a really, once as always, a force for good. It's a flag that says we care. It's a flag that says, come with us. You're part of our family, and they don't need to have that blood connection. So it's just so iconic for that, and it has been for hundreds of years. So it's been an absolute joy to be able to do more of that and work with people like yourself, the whole gang at London Scottish House. So yeah.
Well, we're very grateful that we found you quite early on in your journey. I still can't quite believe how much you've been able to achieve in such a short space of time. Before we move on to a bit of that, do you want to just talk about the tradition that you've kept in the way in your process and the way that you've decided to work, because it was a conscious decision, and then we can kind of move on to the slightly more rebellious side.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you've asked that, because it is such a fundamentally important symbol of what we stand for. So we've opted to go in terms of traditional methods of manufacturing, and there's several kind of parallels that run beside that. So we've got these beautiful 100-year-old looms that are cast iron. It's a labor intensive method of manufacturing. It's to my mind probably it's a different skill set, but it is high, there's a lot of requirements on the individual to operate these. So therefore, being labor intensive, that's job creation. For me, that tackles straight on the UN Sustainable Development Goal #1, which is end poverty. So for us, it's really important that we're creating jobs. That was part of the kind of founding 5 threads of purpose. We wanted to protect these skills and create jobs. So we've got these beautiful looms, but then you kind of go and look at them and then you go, actually, the accountant in them thinking, what's the estimated useful life of a cast iron loom that actually, if it's well looked after, well, that's going to last forever. So it's highly sustainable as a piece of equipment compared to probably, we've all got tech, computer or software related devices, and these things become defunct very quickly when something else comes in, and it's much harder to support probably something that's 10 years old than something 100 years old when they decide to scrap that technology. So they're highly sustainable and they'll outlive I think every modern loom that's probably on the planet right now. Also with these, it was really important that we were quite sort of loud and proud in our statement of anti-fast fashion, this mass consumption that the world has kind of ran on for the last 50 years, where it was all about making more, making it cheaper, making it disposable. And I think in this last 12 months, I think everyone, the science is the science, the world is much cleaner, it's had a chance to breathe, and people are maybe reassessing their role in that, what they're consuming. So for me, the whole climate change agenda, in particular from a textiles fashion perspective, it's one of the elephants in the room, in terms of the carbon costs associated with that, in terms of the environmental damage associated, and the modern slavery. That's, you can't buy a t-shirt for less than a coffee and not really think about what you've just funded in terms of the slavery and the environmental side. So these looms are so symbolic, and they're, ultimately from a heritage and culture perspective, they are, they're amazing, they're noisy. You've been up, Lettie, they're just like, wow, the hairs on the back of your neck stand when they're going, and they're just engineering works of art. It's just incredible that all this intricate timing happens exactly perfectly, milliseconds, so that this whole kind of fabric comes to life. So yeah, so it was really important that we went down that route for all of those different kind of statements that we're trying to say. So that, yeah, very much connected with the past, but very much symbolic of what the future should be like. That's not going backwards. That's actually realizing that we got a lot of things probably more balanced. We were far more resourceful. We had far more respect for things, and we just kind of, this last 50 years, I feel like we've all just kind of got caught up in the moment of the next new thing, and we've not really questioned how it actually came to be, and then what happens to it afterwards. So yeah, so it's really important that we went down that route for both historical purposes, but also for us, it's about saying, actually this is looking forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned your 5 threads of purpose. Do you want to just quickly talk through those?
Oh gosh, now you're going to test me. I'm thinking
not in detail.
Lettie, bring them up on the website. But no, gosh, there's so many. I'm terrible because I have all these different kind of like ideas of sort of analogies of where we are. It can change daily, because that is kind of like the thing that's people are talking about around the world. But certainly for us, it was about the job creation, which I've talked about. yeah, for me, it was really important to bring back this part of, you know, society, global industry to a region where it's so iconically connected. You know, everyone predominantly thinks of, first and foremost, tartan as being part of the Highland dress. You know, we've got what happened in Culloden, the Act of Prescription. You know, it's firmly deep rooted in the history of this region. But actually, until we opened our mill a few years ago, you know, the mainland region, there's the Highlands as it stands. I know there's lots of kind of boundaries in terms of what is the Highlands over the centuries, but certainly, you know, as of 1996, I think it is, the Districts and Borough Acts changed, and you know, we are part of the Highland region. We pay Highland Council tax, so we are definitely part of the Highlands. So we're the only mill in the mainland now. So it's really important to bring that home and create the jobs and revive the skills back in this area. And then we're looking at the natural fibres. So that's both plant and animal. Part of that learning that I had in the sort of early years before we started weaving ourselves was really just, I was quite shocked that I didn't appreciate that actually we're using so little of our raw materials here. You know, we've got all this amazing animal fleeces, you know, that are being exported for the carpet market, you know, largely for carpet market, carpet trade. And we're importing, you know, all of these other soft, fine animal fibres. So for me, it's about how do we reconnect? How do we do the rural regeneration? And we use the 21st century for the technology and the science and the bioengineering. So if we feel like we need to have these fibres, which are just protein strings, or from a plant fibre, it's a cellulose string, how can we make them more fit for purpose and not just kind of burn up the planet by having these things going round and round and round? So in terms of looking at that, and also with the natural dyes. So that's a bit of a long haul for us because the industry has become pretty small. A couple of 100 years ago, 7 out of 10 people employed in Scotland worked in textiles. It was massive. It was our thing. You know, it was just in every town from top to bottom. Although in saying that, maybe the Highlands not so. The clearances kind of, yeah, damaged us a little bit. But so yeah, so it was, so where we are now is this whole supply chain is really, you know, it was all about supply and demand, and there was just this desire to kind of maximize profits and buy cheap imports. So these businesses just didn't survive. So for us, behind the scenes in the last few years, we've definitely been working on fundamental research with local universities to look at, you know, the introduction of plant and animal fibres once again, addressing these issues for modern, you know, the modern kind of, I hate the word consumer, but for the modern needs of the world, both in home in terms of what we wear, but really addressing the recovery, the circular economy, and how we can actually see recycling as well, instead of having to go for virgin all the time. So yeah, to do that, the other sort of threads of purpose was very much the design flair of the Highlanders. So it got really sort of a bit of a play on the kind of the biggest forgery in tartan out there is the clan system tartans that, you know, we've all seen the books and the kilt shops and everything like that. My theory is 100, well, I think it's pretty much proven, but I think absolutely the two Sobieski Stewart brothers who claim to be illegitimate grandchildren of Bonnie Prince Charlie, this is around the Sir Walter Scott revival, you know, they came to Cromarty, which is literally along the road from us. You know, they met this man from Cromarty, got the Cromarty manuscript, and lo and behold, after 40 years of ban, there was still this archive of all these tartans. So, and to obviously part of the sort of big celebrations in Edinburgh, we wanted all these clan chiefs to come out and get this, you know, get the tartan back out. And, you know, stories go that, you know, the clan chiefs had to sign over and agree this was their tartan or forfeit land and things like that. So for me, I'm slightly suspicious as to why most tartans of that time look very, very similar, very bright colours compared to what would have been, you know, colours used for clans in particular, kind of, you know, lowlands, highlands, coastal. It was very much about the vegetation, you know, that was where their colours and their dyes and their identity came from. So yeah, so the design flair means that actually if we kind of forget that little bit of the Sobieski Stewarts in the middle there, pre that, the Highlanders were probably, you know, the ones that are kind of were doing most of the design. Unfortunately, it all got lost with that 40 years of ban. So yes, we're bringing it back to the Highlands from a design flair perspective. Just trying to think now, Lettie, you're gonna have to prompt me on my other threads of purpose, or maybe I've covered a couple already.
No, I think you've done I think you've done an excellent job there, and if we haven't covered them, then we are likely to over the course of my next couple of questions.
Yes.
Some shape or form, so don't worry. I promised you I wasn't gonna grill you, so you can stop sweating.
Thank you. They'll come to me.
So you talked about obviously the creation of all of these tartans for the clans, and you and I've talked about the fact that you don't and will never weave a clan tartan.
Yeah.
I don't want you to concentrate too much on that, more on what is it about creating new tartans that really gets you going.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's something that we did specifically purely from a respect and displacement in the industry, knowing how small they were. That was not the right thing to do if you're going to, and I know them all, and they've all been hugely supportive of what we're doing. So yeah, there was an absolute kind of word of honor. That's what you do, and I fully respect that. So we don't do that for that reason. And at the same time allows us to have this kind of blank chapter of, well, what will they say, and it's one of my Instagram lines, is what will they say in 200 years. So for me, it's about saying, the past is there, we respect it, we protect it, we promote it, but can we add to it, and really make it relevant in real time to people's lives as they are today. So our designs kind of take on a number of kind of I suppose interpretations or meanings, but it's all very much tailored to who we work with. So it's for me, I see tartan, and there's all these different interpretations. What's a tweed, what's a check, what's a plaid, what's a tartan. Effectively they're all a bunch of colours in the same order. Some going that way and some going that way. So, but what makes it a tartan? And for me, it's only a tartan, I think, if it's very specifically sending a message. So, and it's taking it to the level of the colour choices, the thread count that's used is very specific to the identity of that community. And as I say, there's no blood relations. We live in a global society now, and we're all so connected, and we share values with people that we will never meet physically, but we're online, but we feel connected to people. So it's using that icon of tartan being symbolic of a community, but putting it into the modern context. So designs for me, all of the new designs that we create are very much saying, well, actually, if somebody saw this, and this could be like yourselves or somebody who's getting married, or even a tartan that we've created ourselves for part of our own collections, like our Earth Day 2020 tartan. It's very much, we know, which is the power of this amazing fabric of our nation, is it's so it's conversational. People see it and immediately want to ask about it. And it's like, well, what's the most important thing? What's your purpose? What's your pride? What do you want to say? Because you're going to get that question, and that's your moment to say. And it's like, it's your book, it's your story. So we use that, and we try to get as detailed and as relevant as we can. And then the story creates the tartan ultimately.
And that is exactly what you did for us.
Yes.
So we tasked you to create 3.
Yeah, I know.
We didn't ask you for 1 or 2, we went for 3.
Yeah.
And we're going to concentrate on the London Scottish House one, which is the one that you have the little sample of with you there.
This one here?
Yes.
Yes.
So just quickly talk through the process that you went through with us, and how did you create that?
Yeah, I mean, it was fortunately at that time I was able to come down and spend some time in the amazing building, and to really get to know you as a group of individuals, and to understand the whole history and the kind of future kind of purpose, if you like, of London Scottish. And it's got the most amazing history, incredible, from the Hodden Grey to, with the drill hall to, things like this. So, I've not got all the pictures, but when I was down, I was getting all these wee bits all around the museum, just absorbing it all like a sponge, and just really getting a sense for the passion and the pride that came from its rich history and all of the people that have walked through those doors. So after those sort of couple of visits, then it was understanding about, what's the the drive for London Scottish going forward, and you're working on this amazing project to completely, you know, kind of give a new lease of life probably for your next 200 years. So to create tartans that were, you know, part of that sort of identity, because there was not a formal tartan, there was the Hod and Grey connection, which, you know, is, you know, from a kind of regimental camouflage style fabric. So yeah, so it was really looking at those key colours that were associated with the history and the future of London Scottish. So this is where we have these greens and blues and reds, you know, that you use in all sorts of kind of aspects of identity. And then it was really understanding, okay, and it was incredible to go through it all from the history, going back to, I've got my notes here, going back to, you know, 1958, 1858, and looking at all of these kind of founding movements as to how, you know, it kind of, how the house came to be. It was this home for, from a kind of sort of military regimental perspective, these people traveling around and coming back, and, you know, your sort of pipes and drums and things like that. So it was, yeah, so it was kind of digging into all of this history and using those significant years of foundation to then 2020, the year that the tartan was created. And we've used those numbers from the actual century or the year, the kind of the passage of time that celebrates. So the 162 threads are in the blue. That was from the kind of founding year that was very much associated with London Scottish to the year that it was created. So yeah, so, and then with yourselves, it was a process of playing with all of these things and seeing how the aesthetics worked as well. And just a process of refinement. And then we had this most amazing summer, it was the summertime, there was an event for you, you know, we hand wove samples for everyone to see, and how all of these three designs reflecting the different aspects, you know, the sort of charity, the undressed, the dressed, where they all work together as a family, but they've all got these little messages kind of woven in with the number of threads and things that we've used. So yeah, so it was, yeah, I mean, it's just for me being up here in the Highlands and to come down to the middle of London, just down Horseferry Road, although I was at the wrong place the very first time. Do you remember that, Lettie?
I do, actually, yeah.
Where did I go? I was like, oh my goodness, what are they going to think of me? I'm literally like an hour away in I was next to the Tower of London, or
yeah, you were in East London somewhere.
There's another Horseferry Road. Who knew? So anyway, so I was clearly not London Scottish then, but you come in and it's just, there's just this home from home feeling, you know, and that's the building, but it's also every one of you that are living and breathing in that building now. And yeah, it's just got this most kind of welcoming, yeah, home feeling about it. So it's been amazing to do, and say I'm away up in the north of Scotland, and to be able to have that connection in London, and you know, and know that you have got this amazing network of people who are really passionate about the country, but also passionate about what it means to be a global Scot, you know, in any city, in any country. Yeah, it's just yeah, it's great.
Well, we all enjoyed the process of designing a tartan, and I have to say, when I started at London Scottish House 2.5 years ago, it's not something that I thought I'd ever be doing, but it was eye-opening. And I do remember sitting with you in our first meeting, and I got emotional talking about why I was so proud to be a Scot in London.
Yeah.
And that's when you and I think realised that we have very similar values and had a very similar kind of idea of what we wanted this tartan to represent. On that, yeah, we've talked briefly about kind of identity, and you've mentioned it a couple of times over the course of this session, but do you want to talk a little bit more about what identity means to you and the people that you create the tartans for?
Yeah, gosh, identity is, yeah, it's, gosh, for me in particular, it's not in a morbid sense, but its identity is it's the impact, and it's what people will say about you as an individual that defines your identity, you know, if you've made an impact. And it's, yeah, from my kind of previous life as an accountant, you know, my kind of black and white scenario is now that actually, gosh, for many years people might have said, oh, she had a nice car, or she went, you know, she did these holidays, and or whatever. But now hopefully it's like, oh yes, she's the girl that helped bring back tartan to the region and she created these jobs, or, you know, and it's just, so identity is about, for me, it's about the impact I have on others. Because when you have that really sort of positive impact, I think that's just, yeah, the kind of fulfillment and honor and all of these really sort of amazing emotions that you get from that, you can't put a value on that. So yes, identity for me is really about your impact on others, and that could just be one other person, don't get me wrong, but that's what defines you. I think that, you know, that's your identity, is what others will say, but you definitely, you know, you hold all the cards to influence that, absolutely. But yeah, so, but it's, yeah, I mean, but then you can ask me another day, identity means something else depending on, yeah, what battle I'm going to kind of head off in that direction and go, I'm going to fight for that. I'm going to say no to that. So, but yeah, it's what others, you know, it's your story. What will others say? So I always kind of like step out of myself and go, what would people say? Apart from being slightly nuts, doing all of this in the first place. My husband, I know the identity or whatever he would write about me is just, yeah, she's kind of gone a bit bonkers, but yeah, I just take myself out and try and kind of, yeah, see what that is. And then, so therefore, it's probably harder for me to do it on myself. But in terms of when I meet somebody new or an organization or community, then, you know, I love getting into that sort of just reading people, and it's just understand. So it's not just, you know, here's our corporate brochure branding of our main colors and here's the timeline. It's actually, I want to speak to people. I want to go in and I want to see things that maybe they see but don't acknowledge anymore, and just, you know, you get under the skin that way. So to pick up an identity, it's so much fun. It's just kind of, you're, you know, getting to know people, you know, and such a personal level, you know, understanding what really moves them. It's yeah.
So the way you talk about it, it makes me kind of think that you tell a story through a cloth, and that story is that person or that company or those people.
Yeah.
And I mean, your process, which you've already talked through, it literally puts that story thread by thread into it, so that it's not just, oh, that looks nice.
Yes, 100%.
There's a story woven into it, and it's, you might not see it, but it's you, the person who it's been created for, knows why it looks like that.
Absolutely, yeah. And that feeling, I think, just transforms what is just, you know, what is a material, is a physical thing, but it's that sense of pride and that sense of courage, you know, that's such a powerful thing, you know, to have these heirlooms, these objects in your life that really move you to that level that you can emotionally connect with them. I think, you know, there can be a lot of things in the world today where you go, oh, that's nice, as you say, oh, that's great, that's handy, that's, you know, that's yeah, that's the new thing, or I've got the latest, but you don't have that same kind of, wow, I feel really connected to that. And you know, potentially this is going to have, my story is going to pass on to somebody else through this very same object. And then you kind of look at the sustainability piece of that as well as the identity around it. So yeah, I just think, you know, it's something special. There's so many things in life that are nice to have and it's very cool and it's very, but you just don't love it the same. But just, you know, to love is the best emotion. So we've got to love things more rather than just, yeah, take it for granted.
Yeah, I completely agree. Talking about love, you obviously love what you do, and you love your the people that you work with, because I think you would not still be doing this if you didn't. How have you fared over the last nearly a year since we went into our first lockdown? I know that's not a fun question, but it's the honesty, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, hindsight will always, you know, be a wonderful thing for everyone. And it's very difficult to see in the moment of, you know, what is hugely challenging as to where to go and how you react as an individual and what you prioritize. But yeah, for us in the last year, we've been very blessed because we're a small company. You know, I would, you know, having a couple of hundred employees and things like that, you know, that is you know, that's that's a big responsibility in a normal situation. So we've been very, so it's always counting our blessings, you know, and looking at how our glass has always been half full. You can get lost in the negativity and the concerns, but actually you've got to try and kind of put them to the side and look at what is positive. So yeah, so we closed for 3 months, 23rd of March, the 29th of June. And throughout that time, I think I've lost you, Lettie. I don't know if you can still see me.
Yes, I can.
You can. Oh, you're back. You're back. So yeah, so throughout that time, it was like, okay, nobody knew what was happening. It was like, we just need to close. We just need to. So that was it. Right, team, you know, go home. We'll just need to work out what's happening here. So in that very first week, kind of, right, for me, it was actually, our business is our business, but we have this major health crisis. This is about saving lives. And so I took to task, and still working on in the background, about, you know, masks, for example. We're fabric producers. We have a health crisis. We had this massive supply chain issues. Very quickly did some research, looking what was happening in other countries that were further ahead than us and how they were tackling it, and thought, gosh, we need to just, you know, we need to get masks in communities. And it was something in our country that never came to be until July. And it was quite frustrating, because I know we're a tiny little company, a little voice, and it maybe wasn't necessarily heard by the relevant politicians that we reached out to. But I made masks, you know, I came out here on my own, got the sewing machine, we donated 1,000 masks for free to whoever wanted them. There was nurses in London who reached out to us. I set up a website. We went to Orkney, to London, and then throughout that process, we eventually did get round to developing a natural fibre product that was completely tested. And I think we are still the only person in the country who's produced a mask that's got particle filtration efficiency test done, it's got face fit test done, it's made from 100% natural fibres, and we do this recovery piece because this whole circular economy needs to kind of resonate with people. So we did that, but we also reached out to another charity when we saw that they were, you know, so it was one, right, how do we take on the politicians about masks? So that was going on in the background, and then making masks for free. And then we saw the National Trust for Scotland's shout out for Save Our Scotland. And we thought, gosh, you know, they're protecting, preserving the past, you know, and they're very much about the land and the heritage and the history. And so there was a lot of similarities there. So reached out to them, said, look, can we help? You know, thinking we'll give you a few items to auction. And then all of a sudden we had this project where we created a tartan with them to raise money for their campaign, and it allowed me to, you know, have some work for the team to come back to. And yeah, so it was kind of 3 months of just, first and foremost for me was as a responsible individual living in Scotland, in the UK, how could I help, you know, with this crisis? That's all that mattered. What could I do? How could I use my knowledge, my skills, the equipment I have here, the team I have here? How could we help with what was first and foremost was saving lives? So yeah, so we did. So that was all of that piece. And then yeah, in terms of coming back to the mill, we came back at the end of June, and yeah, being a small team, we're fortunate, you know, keeping 11, 12 of us going is easier than 200. And we just continued sort of championing, which I think was long before the pandemic, our views on sort of inclusiveness in terms of, you know, fighting modern slavery, in terms of sustainability. And I think these kind of major topics are really resonating with a lot of people. You know, local supply chains, you know, when you're sourcing things as close to home and being transparent about it, it was all part of the building blocks of Prickly Thistle from day one. So we're, you know, we continued with that and proudly say we've not changed. We've had no game plan change. We're just continuing doing what we're doing because we felt like it was always the right path and not the easy path. And I think people have probably sort of admired that, and you know, they can see that we've just not, you know, kind of maybe done a big bit of a marketing whitewash in some respects that some folks maybe have done. It was just who we were. You know, we just believed in that. We believed in the job creation, the sustainable fibres, all etc. So we've been very fortunate that we, you know, people have really supported us throughout that, and we've kept going, and we were, you know, the team were all operating really safely here. You've been up, you know, it's quite an open space. So social distancing absolutely fine. I mean, be socially distanced anyway because the looms are on. No one can speak to each other. They've got they've got ear defenders on. Although we do have a whiteboard now, so they can play games as they kind of walk around and hangman and things like that. So yeah, so we're lucky that we were able to socially distance, bring the team back, and we all feel very fortunate that we can actually come to work. We can still have a degree of social interaction. We can have something to do to fill our day because acutely aware of how this kind of mental health fatigue piece is for a lot of people, particularly when you've had to work from home for nearly a whole year. We feel very lucky we can come to work and still be part of an industry and a product and a brand that promotes things that I think are really what the future's about now. So it's just, first and foremost was how could we help? And we're still doing that behind the scenes.
Yeah, I remember seeing when your Mask of Integrity launched, I was proud of you because I thought that was not only an amazing thing to really care about doing, but doing it properly, which did a lot of people jumped on a bandwagon and went to town on it, but you actually thought, no, let's take a minute and see how we can do this properly. And that's what you've done throughout your whole business. You've made sure every single step of the way you're not cutting corners, no matter how expensive or time consuming or labor intensive it might be. You're doing it properly and making sure that you're kind of keeping that integrity, if you go back to the Mask of Integrity.
Absolutely. It was about not compromising on that, and it was more important to say no. And the whole fashion show piece that came around it was frustrating when you felt we could be part of a government sort of framework that actually very easily empowered a whole industry across the UK to have something homegrown. You got people into work as very sort of wartime efforts, but it was perfectly doable. We used wool in masks in World War II, and we statically charged them with pine resin to naturally attract the particles. And when the technology's there and you're talking about green recovery and we're talking about COP26, what are you doing? The virus is not a fashion show. And every time I would see something like that and not, people could just say this is not a medical device and it was fine. I just thought it was bonkers that we were such a developed country and we just allowed that to happen when quite easily the government could have funded, every person in the country to have at least 2 masks, one to wash, one to wear, and be part of a green recovery circular solution. And the world would have said, wow. And we could have done it, but it's it's for the book, Lettie.
It's for the book, as many things, I think.
Yeah.
So I have a few more questions, but I'm conscious that there are a couple coming through from our lovely audience. So I just want to get a couple of those in. Sandy would like to know about BCorp status.
Oh yes. So B Corporation status. So B Corp it's not something that people are terribly familiar with in this country. I mean, it's kind of, it was very much born in the US, and people like Yvon Chouinard with Patagonia as an organization who also kind of founded 1% for the planet. But B Corp is, and it's funny because in the UK or Scotland, it's very much, you're privately owned, your social enterprise, your charitable status. There's this kind of like silos of well, this means that you are for purely about kind of capital value creation, and or you're clearly just about the community, and people seem to stereotype based on the vehicle. But for me, being an accountant, I was like, well, actually, the private side of being a limited company through private shareholdings is that you ultimately are responsible for everything. That's so important to be, well, I need to be accountable for everything. And then have the flexibility around ownership in the future through employees and things. But the B Corp is something that we felt really important that we should be part of. There's very few brands in Scotland that are part of that, but we submitted our whole B Corp file, if you like, for review last August, kind of a couple of months after we came back. And it's really about constitutionally, by introducing to your articles of association as a company, that you absolutely, regardless of who owns this company, you put planet and people before profit. And that's something that we did subconsciously, but then learning more about B Corp meant actually this is an organization that exists and a framework that exists to really champion those businesses that really, that really do genuinely care about the planet and people before profit. So so we're they're under a bit of kind of like everybody with the whole COVID situation. I think things are taking a bit longer, but it's as I say, we were doing all these things subconsciously, from composting our wool on site to using green energy. You know, we pay higher tariffs for our power because we want it to come from renewable sources such as wind and water. And so all these things we were doing, and then we thought, gosh, actually, you know, we can be part of this really kind of important kind of brand philosophy community, and people around the world who are familiar with B Corp will understand what that means.
Yeah, and I think everything you've already said backs up that. I mean, nobody would be surprised to kind of hear that that's where your journey has led you.
Yeah.
So I think it is definitely something to be proud of.
Yeah.
So something that I would like to know is, and it's probably a question you don't like to answer, is where do you see Prickly Thistle in 10 years?
Oh, the truthful answer is I shouldn't know. I shouldn't know, because I think one thing I've kind of learned, and goes against being an accountant where everything's planned within an inch of its life. Plan. You know, do an audit. It's like 60% of a successful audit is in the planning. And I've just realised, actually, to be relevant into the here and now and the time that you're living, you have to be prepared to not ditch your plan. You know, the destination is the destination. Your founding pillars of who you are, the 5 threads, whatever, they're there. But quite often, just, and because we're so connected, and it is such a fast pace of life, you have to be prepared to change all the time. And I think that very much now, with hindsight, that was plan B with Kickstarter. That was build the mill. You know, now we've got the government's talking about plan Bs, and everybody's talking about plan Bs. And I thought, you know, in 10 years, I shouldn't know today where we're going to be. The most important thing is that we know we're going to be an organization that's going to be relevant and real to the time we live in, you know, and it's how we fit with the concerns that are, be it the B Corp framework, be it the UN SDG goals for 2030, there's 17 of them. You know, this is something that we go back to, thinking, how can we be better for marine life? How can we be better about equality in the workplace, the poverty? So where we use those principles, then actually that should guide who we are. And as long as we're using them, who knows what we'll be doing? I have no clue. I'm sure so. I'll put a bet on it. I'm sure that in 10 years we'll definitely have these looms going, and we'll definitely be producing tartan. I'd like to think we will be using all 100% natural animal plant fibres native to Scotland, and we will absolutely be leading the way in terms of circular economy textiles, because no one's doing anything, unfortunately. But yeah, but generally, I think the honest way of saying, actually, you shouldn't know, because if you know, you lock your vision, you become resistant to the change that needs to happen,
and the change that happens to you.
yeah, absolutely. It's embrace the change.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an important lesson for life. I can honestly say, not only is the last 10 years of my life not turned out as it planned, the last year of my life definitely didn't as planned. So yeah, I think it's good to have those foundations and that to be the important thing, that's what's still going on, and that you're proud of where you've been in the last 10 years, but what you're actually doing on a day-to-day, the work you're actually doing, as long as it fits the framework, doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, exactly. You're still doing a good job. You still feel you've still got your pride, you've got your integrity, you've not compromised, and you're still relevant to the global community that you are responsible for. And then you're responsible for your great grandchildren, you know, who you'll never meet, but you know what we do today will impact on their lives. A
quick question, which I actually think is quite important, is from Stephanie: is your wool sourced from Scotland exclusively, supporting local wool producers?
Yeah, no, this is a really good question. And this is part of what we've been working on the last couple of years with regards to the supply chain, and also then taking on fundamental research ourselves, because like how we knew to weave at the time, which we didn't, we can maybe just spin and dye while we're at it. So that's where we are. So sadly, there's one or two major spinners and dyers in Scotland. We've got in-house spinning and dyeing facilities in some of the major textiles mills, predominantly the likes of the amazing Johnsons of Elgin, who do everything in-house with cashmere, vicuna, that kind of stuff. So looking at who we could supply in Scotland to spin and dye, you know, I'm at them on a regular basis saying, when are you going to start using, you know, the local stuff? You know, and then I'm keeping in touch with the British Wool Organisation. So because I don't own these businesses or run these businesses, all we do from a kind of activist companies, we put pressure on them to understand more, and they are, I think they get it now. They understand the whole responsible wool sourcing. They understand the carbon cost of not using native raw materials. So there's one or two left in Scotland that we use. But what's really good, though, to be honest, is that there's a really active market and supply chain for sort of knitting. So knitting yarns there's far more native raw materials, you know, local sheep, knitters, you name it, natural dyes, and you know, undyed, beautiful, you know, colorways and whatever. But unfortunately, a lot of that's been spun to accommodate the knitting process, which is very different to a weaving process. So we have used some yarns produced predominantly for knitting, but they just lose their tension in the loom. So when you're weaving, you need to have things quite tight, like a drum. And but when you're knitting, there's a bit more relaxation. So these yarns have not been sort of carded and roved and spun into a manner that really works for us. So I would love to be buying 100% Scottish wool, Scottish plant fibres. We've got amazing plants in this country that could be just the same as, you know, sustainably sourced bamboos, flax, you name it. But nobody's doing it yet. So that's next on our list, is that, you know, start a mill, start spinning, start dyeing, do all of that kind of stuff. So, but from knitters, there's a lot out there, which is great. So, but yeah, we work with Scottish suppliers who sadly do import their fibres.
I wonder if we've got any knitters in the audience.
Yeah.
I think the last time I had a pair of knitting needles in my hand, I was about 13.
Oh gosh.
Might take it up again, see how long the lockdown lasts. So a couple of very much more light-hearted questions is, who would you love? I mean, you have designed for some amazing people and companies. Before we found you'd already done Runrig.
I know.
I mean,
that was the
fact that my
thing.
husband had Runrig in the kitchen, he's probably playing, he's got a Scottish playlist on right now if he was making it this afternoon to cook his haggis. But who would you love to design a tartan for?
Gosh, yeah, that's really difficult. Yeah, because it's kind of, well, do we look at a historical person? Do we look at somebody that's relevant to today? And I suppose it's somebody whose message or story that we really feel aligned with. And that could be an unknown, you know, that could just be somebody in a village somewhere doing something amazing, you know. And that's one thing I've learned as well, that, you know, it's this whole kind of status world. And we talked a little bit about this briefly before we jump on here, you know, this kind of big data and all this kind of stuff. But actually it's about quality of impact, isn't it? So I think, you know, there could be somebody there that's just not everyone knows, but for us could be the most humbling experience because of that impact they're having in their community. It's you know, I don't know. It's not something I really think about. It's kind of, it just, you know, things happen, and I'm just a firm believer of, you know, karma, or, you know, it's just, you can't force, I think. And then maybe that's where it's been really good for us, is that we've never really forced or targeted, because it's these invasive marketing sales techniques from a corporate world that I was part of for years. Now I look at it and go, gosh, that's just like, so, you know, it's just invasive. And so for me, it's about earned word of mouth, you know, real genuine interest. And I think that's how we've worked with all of the amazing people we have. You know, it was never a kind of like, let's go and do the whole, call them up and say this and that. and we've just hopefully then people can see what we're about and just think, you know what, we get what they're about. We trust, you know, they've got integrity, they've got these values. That's just think it, you know, and they feel like, yeah, they kind of have the same things as us. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I suppose, you know what, I don't know. I think actually what would have been really nice is probably design a tartan for my brother. That would have been lovely to do.
Yeah, I think that's a very fits where you've come from, I think.
Yeah.
And finally, what gets you up in the morning?
Coffee.
Bearing in mind you are still in the mill at about 1 a.m.
Yeah, coffee. What gets me up in the morning? Oh gosh. Yeah. Oh, it's just, you know, it's just this hell bent, never give up kind of thing. And yeah, just now, this last year, it's, you know, it's everyone's the same, but you know, every day. And I feel bad because obviously the family time and the children and everything like that. But it's like every day, you know, 7 days a week, just come in and, you know, weekend you can be here on your own and things like that. But it's just, I think because I feel so passionate about what I've learned and what we've discovered, you know, this team of people that work here and rely upon me, the customers, the clients, the people like you, you just like, you know what, you just have to give it everything, Claire, to, you know, to, yeah, I just don't know. It's just, there's just this kind of hell. Sometimes I don't even think about it like it's now robotic. I just get up and I get dressed and I go, okay, Ellen, bye guys, kids, whatever, and I'll see you in the morning when I come back. But yeah, I feel so passionate about what I do. I don't even need to think about it. It's just what I do.
Yeah, I would say you're probably the least robotic person I've ever met.
Yes.
So I think we've now hit 7 o'clock. So I think it's a good time to end.
Yep.
I want to thank you so much, Claire, for
No.
taking this time. I've had quite a lot of messages just proclaiming their love for you, as I do regularly.
No.
Honestly, you are a breath of fresh air, and we're all very lucky to be living in a world where there are people like you doing what you're doing. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for our tartans, and for helping us to create our identity into some tartans that will be there in 200 years and well after we're gone.
Absolutely.
Happy Burns Night, everybody. I'll be putting this recording onto YouTube hopefully this week if I can sort the technology out. And I will let you all go. So thanks, Claire.
Yeah. No, thank you, Lettie, and I'm seeing all the messages coming up there. Thank you all so much. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your Burns evening. I'm going to go and have my coffee and my buttery because it's a really. I've got a buttery.
Can you send one down to me?
Yum. Which you need to add butter to because obviously there's not enough fat in it.
You toast it, then you butter it.
Absolutely. So this is me going to have signing off to have my buttery. But no, thank you so much, Lettie. And you know, really for me, and I'm seeing there's the Karen on there as well, another client of ours. It's just, you know what, it's you guys that write the story. I have the pleasure of being able to pull that together in some form of fabric that is part of the fabric of the world. So it's all thanks to everyone who allows us to be part of that journey. So no, we're just here because of the stories you create. So thank you all so much, and yeah, have an amazing rest of the Burns night, folks. Go and Google how rebellious Robbie Burns was, and then yeah, until next time, Lettie.
Until next time.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Bye, everybody.